Wrong policy. Yeah.
Right, and that must be, I see a little share. Okay.
I really love that the camera is this close. to
Yeah,
me.
Yeah, that's really nice. That's really nice. What date did you send this out, Sarah? I know I looked at it last night, but I was trying to find
It
it.
would have been last Friday.
Okay. Okay. No. Okay.
Because the published agenda, this is the published agenda. The agenda that we had here needed to have cybersecurity added.
Okay.
It's
So
on your printed one.
It's
Yeah,
on the printed
it's on the
one.
one that went out.
Okay.
And the reason that was added late was simply that we didn't really have one. Jeff's been researching. So I said,
Okay.
if we can get to it, we'll get to it. If not, then we can bump it to the next meeting.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, okay. All right, good morning. Welcome to the Gresham-Barlow Board of Education Board Policy Committee. And our board members, Myra Gomez, Kathy Keithley, and Chris Howard. This committee meets to review policies for updates, changes, or any other options that are going on with the policy. This committee does not make the final recommendation on any policies. They are forwarded, excuse me, to the full board for discussion, usually during an upcoming work session, depending on the level of information that may be required for an update. Board policy, after going to a board work session, are then sent to the board for inclusion in a board business meeting. So this morning, we do have several policies, and they are listed on the agenda. Briefly, DN, disposal of property, CBG, evaluation superintendent, GBN, sexual harassment, GBN AB, reporting of suspected abuse of child, JBA, sexual harassment, JHFE, reporting of suspected abuse of child, KGBB, firearms prohibited, and EHB, cybersecurity. Also in attendance, we have staff, Mr. John Cook and Dr. Tracy Klinger, and keeping notes for us, Sarah Avery and thank you, Cynthia Forrest. So good morning, and I'm not sure who's starting off with stuff yet, but we have a sample policy for disposal of district property that I think probably has a number of questions that it may get referred for more detail. Yes, Kathy.
I just, one note is, when I first started on this committee, the policies that come before us are typically those that our OSBA membership says you have to make changes to, or we see things that are outdated. So what prompted this policy to come before us today? The disposal of property.
The DN.
It needed to be updated, and we had, because of some action that we took, that it was unclear what the process should be. And not all policies come to us because of OSBA. We've done a policy rewrite and review, but this
Yeah,
one came
most of the
because
time
it
it
wasn't
does,
clear. It wasn't
but
clear in
then
its
when it did, and
application.
that's why. I asked the
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, and I believe that just to add a little context to that, Chair, it came out of a conversation board meeting, and the board said we will relook at this to see if there needs to be some changes. So this is
Right.
just a time to consider that policy. If this committee doesn't see changes, then they wouldn't recommend it to go forward.
Right, right. So this is not specifically one that came up on the review of OSBA. We asked for it because it was coming up as in use, and we wanted to make sure that it was updated. If need
So
be.
version 1 and version 2 which is the original?
OSBA sent us two versions that they have when we asked about the policy. On our website, we've been using version 1. So if you look at DN in our policy book, that's the basis for our policy.
Okay. And what's the big difference, other than there appears to be some dollar amounts on version 2, and that's again another option from OSBA, right? So it's still kind of, it has $100, and it also, I think that's the biggest thing.
Well, can.
But there's more to it. There's more to it. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, just because in version 1, the current, it says the board may, and in version 2, it says the superintendent may. I know the board still has to pass a resolution, but that seems clearly, was version 2 the recommended from OSBA?
No, I don't think they recommended. They just sent us their two versions, and you picked up on what I did, Kathy, when I reviewed these. I think version 1, the reason that I want to think that we have it on the website, it does give the board more control over this process. I am more comfortable with that one from just a policy perspective and an operations perspective. So I do think that's the key difference.
Well, and version 2 also has the steps outlined like more clearly with the amount
It does.
when the role of the manager, it's just more detailed. It has the role of the business manager, it has the amount.
I'm looking at it right now too.
Okay, so any other basic, because then I think this one is gonna take a tiny bit of discussion that. As I had read it earlier and through our other conversations, that we're gonna need a lot more information
We are.
on several different areas of disposal.
This is a current policy on the website.
What's up on the
Yeah,
screen
on the
right now,
screen.
Kathy? So,
Well, but if version 1
yeah,
is the current.
It's based off of it. There are some differences.
Oh, okay, it is.
okay,
Mhm.
okay. All right,
And in this case, this one specifically says it's property in the title, but it says report any equipment or material. It
Mhm.
doesn't specifically say property.
Agreed.
So what's the intent? Property or equipment or material?
that's one of the questions that I think we need to define. What does
Yes.
property mean? And we may have to add additional sections.
We
Because
may.
I look at it and I see 4 different definitions or applications of property.
And I'm with you because I don't know that the policy was written, or at least how I read it, trying not to interpret people who brought this forward. That it discussed land as
Mhm.
disposable property. And I
I'm
don't,
sorry, it does or
doesn't.
doesn't, right?
It does
It really
not.
doesn't.
So when, and I don't know that that was considered before, and I wouldn't see land as being, no longer suitable for any reason. It may not be suitable to build a building on, which is the current properties that we're talking about. They're not big enough for modern campuses. On the other hand, property is never really, to me, disposable. It's an asset, so maybe there is something that we should do differently. I don't know.
Well, any of these are assets.
That's true too.
You
They
know,
are
I mean,
assets.
um, so my first thought was, a better definition of property, because I think sometimes when people hear property, they think physical land,
Mhm.
and yet this has been used also to get rid of equipment.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it's also been used, I don't know what the process is, when we get rid of curriculum material.
Mm.
And where I was thinking about with that and technology, whether or not it's in the policy or an
Mhm.
AR in the policy, responsible disposal of stuff. So, you know, with curriculum materials,
Mhm.
recyclable stuff, what can be used, what needs to be destroyed, whatever.
Well, this is
Same-
excessively damaged, so it wouldn't be stuff that can be repaired.
No, but if it's outdated,
Yeah, like outdated curriculum,
Mhm.
outdated
Yeah.
computers,
yeah.
and we do run that through this process.
But there isn't really anything in here that says, because
Oh,
we've had over the
mhm.
years, different people in leadership who felt like technology disposable, sorry, I can't get the word out. this morning.
Disposal.
Yes, thank you. Meant just literally throwing
Throw
it
it away.
away.
Mhm.
Where we've tried to be a little bit more environmentally.
Yeah.
Aware that we do it in such a way that takes parts, you know, that has someone else take care of that for us as well.
Agreed.
That's skilled in doing that. So I think codifying that in an AR maybe is where it belongs, because it's the process of implementing the policy, but back to describing what components are in that. And so I was thinking that as far as what we would have access to get rid of is equipment things, furniture,
Mhm.
um,
And we don't have an AR for this, not that
no,
we have.
see, curriculum materials, technology, and real property.
Mhm.
So that's where I think a lot of this is gonna need to have, and where some of the more complicated, the technology disposal. Who's deciding by committee that it's no longer applicable, it doesn't work, and then how we get. Responsibly get rid of it, and then the real property is gonna need to have some more about, again. Why did we originally get the property, what's it for, and having a land, legal opinion on it.
Land use.
So what I propose, is we need to address those 3 questions, or those 3 things. Definition of property,
Mhm.
proper disposal, and who makes those determinations. And that would be an OSBA consult is what I'm thinking.
Okay,
As I wrote, did somebody write that down a second?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The definition of property disposal, who makes the decisions?
And when you say who makes the decisions, John, who makes what decisions?
Well, and that's gonna be, it depends. So I'll give you two circumstances that illustrate that. If we do a curriculum adoption, then we have some obsolete curriculum to get rid of. So there's books, et cetera, and that would be the adopting committee to me, or a superintendent or a deputy superintendent decision. When it comes to obsolete computers, that would be a technology department. We don't need these anymore. We can't support these. We need to recycle them. Other equipment from facilities, we have a truck that's 30 years old, we can't repair anymore. We need to obsolete and sell that. So it would be different groups of people, but we need to assemble those experts and we get a definition of who those people are.
and then back to what you guys caught, that is it the superintendent, I mean, the superintendent is ultimately, but
With the approval maybe.
with the approval of the board.
I think we haven't had to for a while, but we bring the obsolete materials list when there's big ones to the consent agenda.
Mhm.
And then it's approved by consent, so you have the opportunity to see them in advance.
So that might be as well, for instance, coming to consent agenda for curriculum material. How would we make sure that we have any conversation that needs to be had about, we're doing this on a 3 or 5 or 7 year plan, just putting into place as people move on, as people are
Mhm.
different. How do we say we don't keep curriculum for 10 years, that it's not unheard of to get rid of it in 3 years? How do we kind of put in there an expectation and not just putting it in consent agenda?
Well, we could choose not to put it in consent agenda. We could make it an item on the board for discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would be able to have that because cabinet members are there to answer those
Cause
questions.
then you can at least have more of
Mhm.
even a presentation. Consent is just, we're telling you we're gonna get rid of it,
Mhm.
and we can pull it off the consent agenda at any time and say we want more information.
We could, and that may be a better way to go if you have questions, because sometimes it really is perfunctory items that are 40 years old that we just need to get off the shelves because they're taking up space, and we
Mhm.
need to follow the process to do that.
Mhm.
But I don't know what the board would be most comfortable with doing.
Those lists, though, are itemized lists.
They are.
Like,
The fixed asset.
Yeah.
like,
With
well,
the
and with the, like,
textbook
when you're talking
number.
about curriculum,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
so it's, and I think what really is coming to mind is moving North Gresham from one building to another. There was a lot of obsoleting with a
Mm,
building that had been around that long, but
Mhm.
certainly with curriculum, when we've purchased something new, the old's gonna go, or we're not gonna use the new, right? So,
Right. Somehow, I'm
Yeah.
just thinking somehow in some way, a little bit of an explanation just at
Mhm.
that point.
Mhm. Yeah.
Again, if a board member hasn't been around when we've done a curriculum adoption.
Right.
They don't realize that that the books are not necessarily, they don't have value to sell them.
Right.
That's maybe where I'm going as well, is that some things maybe we can,
Mhm.
but, I don't think I wanna rely on that in any kind of, as we're doing a curriculum adoption. And by the way, we're gonna sell the books. That's not really practical. And I don't want that to start coming into the conversation as well.
We will take it back. We will get answers to those questions or
Okay.
suggestions, then we'll bring
Yeah.
it back to this committee.
And define, certainly the difference between even a truck
Mhm.
versus a desk.
Exactly.
That's a different that's a different level of
It is.
disposal as well.
And that's a good thing too, because when we did the bond, we obsoleted a lot of furniture because we bought new furniture with the
Right,
bond.
right. And some of that furniture did go,
Kids.
Yeah,
We
it did.
we
Yeah.
may need to pull facilities into the conversation because
Mhm.
even curriculum kind of is processed through that office, like I
Yeah.
sign off on it or
I can,
it,
I'll take it to them too.
yeah,
And
we
we'll
need some
have-
feedback.
and
Yeah,
does,
that's okay.
the technology disposal, does it need to have something in here? Because I know that some of the technology that isn't as suitable for our in-house use, they've been able to repurpose some of it so that some of the graduating seniors can have a device. Is that in policy that they can do
Oh.
that? Because it's a good thing, but they're giving away, assets. And I'm not sure where that there's been a few that have been given to students.
Oh, yeah,
but I
we've done it
don't-
for 2 or 3 years. in a row
Yeah,
now.
and so, we're talking about 10 or 15
Yeah.
devices, so it's not hundreds of them, and we're not buying them specifically to give to seniors. But just again, that definition of
Mhm.
how is that tracked and how is the approval on that? And I don't want to stop that process, but I just want to make sure again, as we move through different people in the seats,
Mhm.
that somebody's not trying to remember, why did we start just giving away stuff?
Yeah.
We're not giving away stuff.
Bob, please, Kathy.
Well, I think one of the questions is, the level of differentiation between curriculum and fixed assets like,
Mhm.
desks and trucks.
Yes.
And real property.
Yes.
And will it be able to be encompassed in one policy, or should it be?
We'll have to come back to you. with that.
But one question I had was, we didn't declare the property surplus before when we needed to. Where does it say that we needed to do that? Is that a legal requirement?
Trying to follow the conversations that have been brought forward. I believe that people are saying it's a legal requirement. I haven't been able to find that yet to say that I agree or disagree with it. I suspect from a board and a public property perspective, there is a legal process to follow. We should do. I just haven't seen it yet.
Well, whatever that is, it needs to be in the policy.
does,
obviously.
Right.
Yep. We will get it back to you. And to your point, Kathy, I think, and you said it earlier, Chris, maybe the policy gets a little updated with definitions, but we probably need an AR.
Right,
Mhm.
because an AR is easier to change
Mhm.
as stuff is updated.
And just for the sake of explanation, an AR is.
Administrative rule, and it gives us the plan for how do we operate under the policy to make
So
this
the
happen.
policy is what, and the AR would be how.
The policy, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Just,
and so this may not come back to the committee at our next meeting. It may take a couple of,
It may take a while.
may
Yeah.
take a while, because it sounds like we're gonna get facilities involved, technology involved, conversation with the curriculum group.
And with OSBA.
And then with OSBA
Mhm.
and we may, yeah, so
Yep.
it has a lot of questions and some legal advice, which OSBA can provide or say, here's some recommendations we need to talk to.
Could take
So
some time.
this particular one will not show up for,
Mhm.
discussion at a work session right away
No.
or, for any kind of approval.
It will not, Chair.
Okay, all right. Okay, evaluation superintendent. It's a required policy.
Yes, it
We
is.
have to adopt it and implement it, and they do recommend, it says in highlight that we recommend that there's no conflicting language between what we set up, because the board sets up the agreement, the contract between the superintendent and the board of the district. So making sure we're doing evaluation, that we're not at cross odds with it. And I believe Mr. Cook, which I didn't see in here, or it could be just under the ORS. Yeah, I guess it's in the last paragraph that, they did change the law a little bit that said you have to do, but I don't see actually a date, so we might want to look at that. You can't remove a superintendent without having done an evaluation. I believe
Oh.
they changed that a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
There was a school district that had a problem with that.
Yes,
And so I think that needs to be updated, so.
and I'm not seeing that language here either.
No, so I'm not seeing that there's not been well, we haven't readopted it, but I don't see that language that,
We don't know if that was this policy though,
is it, I'm not sure.
because that did change.
Right, but I don't know where it changed.
I don't remember if it was this policy or a different one.
I'm gonna look up.
But it does say
superintendent.
that they need to be given the areas that need to be remedied.
Right. Where does that say? Sorry.
But that first sentence in the
Oh,
last paragraph
okay,
is that the board has to give them in writing specific areas to be remedied. And prior notice,
hmm
so we could just include something about a timeline, evaluation timeline or something like
okay,
that.
okay,
Because the language is there. Because the board may dismiss or non-renew, but it's after the opportunity for correction has been made.
right.
There is when it comes to qualities and duties, CBA, which is different than this policy online, and I want to go back to evaluation, which is CBG. Is that what we're currently
That's
on
what we're
anyway?
on,
Yeah, okay. And then there's CBC with superintendent's contract.
So CB specifically, they added the board may not direct the superintendent to take any action that conflicts with local, state, or federal law that applies to school districts. There was one that said in relation to that, because of a other local school district that had issues with the
Mhm.
superintendent. So I remember us reviewing that when it came out.
Right, so I just wasn't sure because then we got this and I wasn't sure where that other one went.
Really short one.
It is. See, the superintendent's contract one is pretty short too and looks straightforward. There's a lot of superintendent.
Cause it does say dismiss or non-renew pursuant to board policy, but if there is a separate policy, it probably ought to be referenced there. I don't know if we do that typically, reference another policy within a policy.
So CB, that's the change that we most recently made.
Which one, Tracy?
CB, just superintendent.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
So CBG goes into evaluation and it says the board will formally evaluate the superintendent's job performance at least once a year. And it'll be, and it says what it'll be based on. It doesn't say anything about a dismissal or retaining.
Cause the law was pretty clear about timing.
So, but wouldn't that be in, is there a discipline of the superintendent? Would that be in there?
I think well,
Because this one talks about meeting an evaluation. It doesn't talk about what you do if you do the evaluation. So, and if there's another policy that directs or talks specifically of actionable items against the superintendent, that's where it would be, not this, but
So
only if we have one. If we don't,
that policy CB superintendent does reference Senate Bill 1521.
Okay.
Which that was the Senate bill that said
Okay.
no cause
Okay.
firing, superintendents with the no cause
Right.
firing clause in their contract must receive at least 12 months notice of termination.
Right, that's the one.
that's where it would be then.
That's
not.
okay,
okay,
okay.
that makes sense.
But we can add something about like, the opportunity to correct problems or following a predetermined timeline or something like that.
Mhm.
So that it's not like, we haven't evaluated you all year, but now since we want to fire you, we'll do an evaluation a week before we fire you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Right,
and
like-
that's kind of what happened, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and if I'm gonna suggest a timeline, our administrators want a timeline of. We have our goals conference and evaluation stuff right about now.
And
in
we've been
October.
following that.
And we have.
Mhm.
So there is, to bring that in alignment, maybe the superintendent follows the administrative timeline,
Yeah.
Well, but
in our
So-
evaluation handbook.
But my understanding was always the superintendent, that's under statute too, that the superintendent has to be reviewed by. Because we always have to bring it to him by March, and I thought it was a March 1st
And you
deadline.
might be right. I
It
don't know.
is.
Okay,
Mhm.
So
okay,
I think that's already in.
okay,
Yeah.
then we're good.
Changing the timeline, I think that's already in.
Yeah.
Or, and our timeline matches what you're saying.
Right, we're
Right.
just saying it's not in here, so
Right.
if we say
Right.
that it's following that, or it's already something that says that there is a timeline.
Mhm.
Cause yeah, you're right, we have been following.
So
We'll
CBG,
have to look at the ORS, because I was like, I think it is referenced.
what's the Senate bill that you just referenced in there?
1521.
1521. Yeah, because we could say, I'm assuming this is in there, so say that we could reference Senate Bill 1521 for superintendent's evaluation timeline.
Right, right. And I'm looking just at some of the other policies we actually have to look at later in this meeting.
Mhm.
We could have another reference down here, policy CB. We could reference that as part of,
So if we're taking, now I'm asking for the committee's guidance. Are we taking this to a work session with those answers, or are we gonna get those answers and bring it back to this committee?
Can go to the board with those
I
answers.
think so, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So the answer really that we need to reference in here is timeline.
Mhm,
Is that about
Yeah.
it?
mhm.
Timeline, and it's just the clarification, you have to do it before you take any other action to remove.
So you're gonna draft language that represents those things? I think that's where I'm,
That's a
Yeah.
tough one.
if you want him to draft language and then take that to us, it should come to a policy
Yeah,
Shouldn't I agree.
and I still like something that just says, and by the way, we have policy CB, which goes also into
Mhm.
more detail. Um,
There is another option, because I don't necessarily want to draft the timeline. If we do the legal references at the bottom and that timeline is
Is
in
in
there,
there.
maybe we don't need to write
Exactly.
languages.
That would be, that's what I was gonna
that
say.
would
Like,
be,
we should
that would be
research what
yeah,
the.
because then we're having to
timeline is.
do updates on two policies that are
That
talking about the
doesn't make
same
any
thing.
sense.
So if the timeline and clarification is in Senate Bill 1521, we will
Mhm.
reference 1521 in the legal references section and bring it to the work session for everybody to consider.
And
And I don't know if it's, so,
board policy CB.
I know 1521 was the one that came out of the 2022 legislation. That specifically referenced no cause firing. Based on
Right.
a district that had a no cause firing.
Right,
I don't know if that's the Senate bill that already denotes the timeline for the superintendent
Right.
contract and evaluation.
If we're not comfortable when we consult, we'll just bring it back to this committee and we'll bring it forward.
okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right, um,
Next one, CNJBA.
okay. So I only saw one, there's some strikeouts and a highlight to add an email address, which it's always tricky to add an email address. That shouldn't change. I mean, is there one that's a generic that goes to human resources email, or you have to put in a person and that would just forward to someone else?
Usually it goes to a person, human resources. There isn't a generic human resources email.
Mhm.
And people can always just call. No matter what, when they make a report,
Uh-huh. Okay.
all
So we
email-
just have to be aware then that there's an email that would need to be reviewed, to make
Yes.
sure that it's still the current email.
Yep.
And then some of the red strikeout, was that just information that was either, it was in someplace else?
It broadens the definition without limiting
put-
it, I think.
Well, it put the information down below as a footnote.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And I don't think there was anything else I've seen on that one. Okay, so that one, and that one has a lot of title and stuff on it too.
It
So,
I think there's some numbering issues down to federal definitions. You go from 1 to 22.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll fix
Oh,
that.
yeah,
116,
1 to 27.
12 on page 3,
Yeah,
170.
Oh, it's got 1 to
All of them
22.
are.
Yeah, all of them are
Yeah.
like that. And then it goes 1 to 27,
So
you
we'll,
know.
It put one in the first order as opposed to continuing the numbers, like in the first.
Yeah.
Page
Yeah.
3, it should be 7-8 and 178, should be 12 and it's 112.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it just needs some, yeah.
we will
Okay.
clean those up. Otherwise, those are really just changes. It's not
Okay.
substantive.
Okay. Okay.
There's
So we
one
will-
change on the last page.
Let me go there
Mhm.
now. It says charging an individual with a code of conduct violation for making a material false statement, and this is new.
Uh-huh.
In bad faith in the courts of grievance proceeding does not constitute retaliation. So. And
We'll
what
put
that,
in layman terms.
what that means is if somebody is found to have made a false statement and then we have to act on that, it's not considered retaliation anymore.
Okay,
There was a time in the past where it could be.
okay. All right, so that one's gonna come to work session
Yes, it is with the numbers changes
and
and.
the update numbers.
Yep.
Okay. I had, on this next one, DBNAB, JHFE,
Mhm.
reporting of suspected abuse of child.
Mhm.
It. It's difficult to read, because it talks about board members are mandatory reporters.
Mhm.
But then as soon as it says board member, every other thing says employee, employee, employee. And then it throws board member in and it talks about employee, employee, employee and staff. And so it really doesn't, it doesn't keep it straight when you go through and read it. And this one, there was this one, and I think also the next one was even worse.
Sexual harassment one?
Yeah, there was.
Or the reporting of a suspected abuse.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So it just, and I didn't know, because it also referenced, as I was reading it, it talks about board members elected in charter, elected in charter, elected in charter. Can we just make a footnote that this includes all board members, whether elected or part of a charter board, rather than putting that in every single time? It just read,
Because I think you're right. Oh, go ahead, Kathy, you're about to talk.
Well, just
Mhm.
that, I have, do you know, Chris, where it said employee and not board? Cause everything I'm reading says board
Um,
member, contractor,
because I was
agent, or
reading, is there
volunteer.
another one of the, because I was
No,
reading,
it also
no,
says board member.
any board member or district employee.
Right,
And then it goes on, and it talks about, there were several other places then where it talked about. a
and I
board
just haven't
member,
seen
or-
that because abuse of the child by board member,
Right.
elected charter district employees, every place I see says board member, so.
Because there was one, I
If you
thought it was
have a
this
place-
one, when I was reading it, that it said, let's see here, let me look at it real quick.
Because I'm kind of seeing what Kathy sees, so
Let's
it's
see.
pretty.
There's a,
Well, there's one that just says employee, but it references paid admin.
It may not have been in this,
might have been a different
it
one.
might have been one farther down in here. It might have been, reporting of abuse, JHFE.
Where are you seeing that one? Because I think you're right. This wouldn't apply to a board, that section wouldn't apply to a board member because we would put an employee on paid admin leave.
But I
that's-
absolutely
yeah,
like the
Yeah,
Mhm.
clarification.
Because there really
that down
isn't any way
below,
to get
board
rid of-
member means elected and charter, so you
right.
can clean that up
Yeah.
throughout the document.
Board.
Oh, so it's the same, let's see. So those are the same. I don't know, because when I was reading it last night, it seemed like employee kept coming up.
So as you're getting that, Chris, what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, yeah.
From what I'm hearing from both of you is. Take out some of that language that's continually referenced about
Right,
how it defines board member.
right.
Footnote it at the bottom of one of the pages and then we're done. Okay.
And that's just
Let me
the
just read it real
school
quick.
and charter board.
Yes.
Elected
right.
and charter.
Mhm.
Right.
Elected and charter. We're still gonna reference
Mm.
board member.
Right,
Right.
right.
And if you find it, Chris, you can.
Yeah,
share it in the email.
yeah. I'm looking at it real quick. Keep going. And I wasn't sure, district designated license administrator alternate, is that on our website? Where is that at?
For child abuse?
Yeah, and I guess it's the same, is it the same policy, GBNA/JHFA and FE, and we see, are there, because I was trying to find the differences between the two.
So one is for staff and one is for,
Cause I read through them and I
Yeah.
didn't see a lot
So,
of.
so which one is
One-
for staff?
The
Okay,
G section ones are for staff.
okay,
The
so
J-
that
J
might,
section's students.
oh. Okay, just a second, sorry.
But they are typically,
so it
There's some-
sometimes
literally.
there's small
it is-
changes.
They
but
reference each
they're
other, they
Yeah.
just flip flop the order. So
Yeah.
this one is focused on students.
So if it's not referenced on the website, Chris, what we do here is
Uh-huh.
if a principal is the one being accused,
JBA
the
is-
supervisor is the investigator.
So anything that starts with a G is staff,
Okay,
and
And then
anything
we
with
add
a
a
J
the superintendent is
is
the
student.
person accused, it goes to HR.
Yes.
yeah, okay, let me just, because I just kept seeing employee, and I'm trying to find it now where I was looking at it.
To your point, Chris, the word employee is in the policy 25 times, so
Uh-huh,
there is
uh-huh,
employee,
uh-huh.
employee.
Right,
District, district.
okay.
I mean, even right in that first sentence.
Mhm. And so what's the difference between the two, sorry, the GBNAB and the JHFE?
GBN is designed around staff. The J is
Okay.
designed around students. Both of them are very, very similar.
Where's the difference? Because
There's not much that you will find.
Okay,
It's, in my experience, haven't found any yet, but I didn't
Okay.
look at both of them side by side to tell you that's true in this
Okay.
case.
So do you know what the rationale would be to have, what is the requirement that we have two distinct policies that say almost identically the same
The
thing?
law defines, the law requires that there are different policies for adults as well as how you report for students, and that's how this is. So it really comes up with the exact same policy.
And it does, I mean, it mentions several times, you know, that it's posted in the buildings, and
Mhm.
I guess as a board member, I wouldn't know who any of that was. I would contact the superintendent.
You wouldn't, but every year,
Hmm.
staff, there's required training every year about reporting.
And the board has to
Abuse.
take that as
Yep,
well.
so the staff know who to go to.
Uh-huh. Although the information that the board does, the mandatory training doesn't specify
Mhm.
who it gets reported to.
Right.
It just says we have to report
What
it.
we yeah, for you all, what
Right.
we train staff is go to your principal. If your principal is the one you don't need to go to, you go to that supervisor.
Mhm. Okay. Okay, I'll look at it again if I see something else in it, but I know
Okay.
when I read it, I just kept seeing the word employee so many times, and I thought,
Mhm.
okay, we're not employees. And make sure that it was still clear what board members do and how board members, because um. Because I guess as a board member that I'm not an employee, I'm a public.
You're elected official.
And so
Mhm.
if I had reason to suspect abuse of a child, I would probably be going straight to DHS.
You would,
You know,
and
because I wouldn't know who to report it to in which building. I wouldn't want to make too many phone calls
No.
and try and report something that then is gonna become public.
But that also falls under
inadvertently.
mandatory reporting.
Right.
You report it to It's just that you
Yeah,
report it to someone, an
right,
appropriate
and
authority.
DHS, right, right,
Yeah.
because I have done that before.
If you reported it, let's say to me, I would say we need to call the DHS.
Okay,
Right, like that's
okay.
what the,
Yeah.
Even though,
the
so
coaching
if
would be-
if it was like, I reported it to you, and you're like, wow, it's not my building, but here's
I
how we're
would
gonna
still
do
say,
this.
Chris, you're gonna have to be the reporter, cause you're
Right.
the one that had the experience.
Right,
And then
okay.
probably offer to support you with that, if you,
Okay.
you know what I mean, that's
Yeah.
what we often do with some
And
of
there
our
was an
staff.
instance last week where a staff member had concern about something that happened, went to the principal. Right thing to do, but then the principal immediately said, you also need to call DHS.
Okay, okay,
Mhm.
okay. And that might just need to be reinforced with the board as well, that that's,
Mhm.
we would need to do that, okay. All right, so is this one gonna come into the?
GBN will come with the footnote of board member means elected and chartered.
Right,
charter,
and so
and then we
the
can
same-
remove some of that language.
And it would need to be in the same thing in the JHFB.
That was correct.
Because it's the same thing.
And JBA.
Because it does have on both of those, it does describe at the bottom who the people are, person, contractor, agent, volunteer.
Mhm.
Could put school board member on there too.
You could.
Could be just that's part of elected official.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay,
Um,
if those two are settled, then we are up to KGBB.
and this one I'd asked to just have a discussion about. I had, before anything that happened recently, this was last year, that, there are a couple of other school districts in the area that have looked at, some have adopted this, some have not. OSBA has it as an optional policy. And, the person that was asking me about it, I didn't want to make the decision to say, no, we're not gonna look at this without bringing it to the committee and say, do we want to do this? I have opinions about it, and, but I know that we have in Multnomah County, a couple of school districts have adopted this policy. And, what it is it addresses, the ability for someone who has a legal concealed carry license. That it prohibits them, even though they have that legal license, it prohibits them from having the weapon on school property. And I did look up last night, information about concealed carry in specific to Oregon.
Mhm.
And that is the law, that certain jurisdictions can say, despite the fact that you have a legal carry license,
Mhm.
school districts and other hospitals, things like that, can say, doesn't matter, doesn't matter. My question about it is always, you know, if you have a policy, how do you enforce it? And it's more, the enforcement comes after the fact.
It does.
I was wondering who are the people who are authorized? Because if the superintendent can authorize other persons to possess weapons, well, who are people, and why would the superintendent authorize people to carry weapons?
I can give you some examples from other districts. Here, we don't have anybody authorized unless we'd have an SRO on site. That's different. Without naming names of other districts, some districts have authorized people to be trained in case there is an active shooter, to have weapons in their building. So those are done by individual. Some districts have a broad policy that staff are allowed to do that in other states, so people just bring as they can.
So that's other states.
Yeah, that's other states. In Oregon, there's a couple of districts that have provided training for staff members to react, and then they secure the weapons in somewhere in a building that people can access. And that has its own pros and cons as well.
Mhm,
So that's done by the superintendent.
mhm.
We don't have that here.
Okay. Yeah, back to mine that it just, and perhaps in some of the other areas where police response is farther away,
Well,
you know,
yeah.
they're working with,
Mhm.
a county related
Yeah.
police response as opposed to a city.
Yeah.
So their police response may be farther. In the metro area, we have numerous police response.
They respond
If that's
quickly.
what's needed.
Yes.
And, my concern is just how would we enforce this? Because a person who has a concealed carry permit
Mhm.
doesn't look any different from somebody who does not.
Correct.
And so having weapons in, on, or around the building, parking lot, um,
The enforcement would really, like you said, it would come after the fact.
right. But I just wanted, again, I wanted to bring it, see if there was something I was missing, you know, certainly my viewpoint is different and,
So even if someone does contact law enforcement because this has happened, what do we think happens with that?
I forget what I read, but you can, if you are, um, they can file a claim against your licensure that you're not following what has been put in place.
And
We
who's
can't,
they, the people that brought it?
the people, so that would be, us. So that would be the district.
Mhm.
Can report it to, because there is a place on the concealed weapon licensure that you can report a variety of things. Not just, but it's doing things that are in violation of what.
What was your
concealed carry.
original question?
Someone brings it in.
Well, and I'm thinking more, I'm not even thinking, because licensure, I'm thinking that would be staff having a firearm with them. So I'm thinking more community member shows up with a firearm. I mean, there's this whole thing. I'm like, oh, okay, well, the whole thing's dependent on reporting. So then you report it, you call the police, what are
And then
they
what
gonna do?
happens?
Like,
I
they're
see.
gonna have a conversation with that person and say,
Well,
there's,
Under
I
our
don't know
policy,
that
they
there's
would.
a
be excluded.
citation,
Yeah.
we trespass them, like, I'm just
Yeah.
kind of thinking about, so then what?
well,
Mhm.
this is
Mhm.
maybe related, but I know that when, on my work grounds, if we had posted no trespassing, then the police could take action upon the person
Mhm.
trespassing.
Right,
If we don't post it as an expectation, they can't do it.
right.
So I don't know if that is
So I said,
part
Well,
of
and
it.
it does say you do have to post a very visible sign.
Yeah,
that
which is
says-
probably kind of the same thing.
And that's what I meant, that we'd have to post.
Mhm.
And I don't think there's a criminal piece to this unless somebody comes in and threatens with a weapon and they have a concealed permit, that would take it to a new level. It would be a reference to law enforcement and probably be a licensure, a concealed permit
Right,
licensure
because
issue.
that's a
And
violation of using your concealed carry.
we have some control over this too, because we do, as a entity, are allowed to issue trespass citations. It gets
Mhm.
reinforced when police are issuing the trespass citation with us and for us.
So do our grounds have signs, like especially at the athletic areas and stuff?
We don't have signs right now. That would be a cost that we would.
But trespassing even, because
Yes.
trespassing, especially during an athletic
Yeah.
event. You can do, you know,
Yeah.
your behavior is not in guidelines with a safe environment, you're trespassing. And like what Kathy just said,
Yeah.
that's kind of an interesting way.
It would give us, yes, and we could give us an opportunity to look some signs and review our signs as well.
Possessive.
We do have a sign that says they
Is that
can't
is
bring
unloaded or
alcohol or
unloaded?
drugs.
We do.
Instrument.
Oh, I see, I see.
So it would be something like
So
that,
it'd be
adding firearms
Ignite.
to it.
Right.
Mhm,
Yeah.
Would
mhm.
be.
we could put on the main entrances or big entrances for the buildings, like at the high school, I can think they need 5 signs for the big entrances, then. The elementary and middle schools are a little different.
So are we adopting this?
No, not necessarily. I mean, that's kind of my question is. Sorry, does this committee feel like we should go ahead and go to the board at least for discussion of work session? On, again. How to enforce it is a question. I don't like putting policies in that you can't enforce. And I also don't want people to feel complacent, that just because we have a policy that says you can't, that somehow that will magically make people not.
Do it.
Yeah. They might think about it twice, but,
And look,
and I don't also want to get into someone who. Sorry, that, I know back in the day, and I think it probably still happens in some more rural areas, but. Go hunting over the weekend, your guns, I remember that happening to a principal where
Mhm.
your gun was still in his car, parked it at the school and.
Suddenly
Then
you
bought up, yeah, and suddenly you've violated federal law.
Go ahead.
This is, I mean. We have to ask the board if this has enough interest in
Mhm.
order to bring it forward.
Mhm.
Because I don't wanna,
Right.
suggest or recommend that we bring it forward when it's. Nobody even wants to talk about it, or we decide that right now it's, the optics are not, I don't know.
Mhm.
But we need to ask the entire board if there's any interest.
Well,
And
and,
bring it forward.
and like I said, I've had contact from this person who's trying to get school districts to do it, and I didn't wanna just say no.
Well, what would be the possible consequences if we don't adopt it? I hear what you're saying. By adopting it, it's like, okay, we adopted it and, but then if we don't. Not having it.
I don't know about possible consequences. I don't think I can answer that question. I can see the advantages and disadvantages very clearly. From a kid perspective, the more often they see a sign that says no firearms, the better we are.
Mhm.
From a public policy implication, it brought all kinds of challenges. So I'm wondering too is,
So.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, and to that point,
Mhm.
if it were before me, then that's exactly what I would want to do. And to your point exactly, what are the pros and cons of doing it and not doing it?
Mhm.
Doing it, not only, I mean, I think you were maybe inferring that if we don't have it and there's an incident, what liability do we have?
Mhm.
But if we do it, because this is someone, I don't even know who they are, who they represent, that is going to apply pressure to get more people to adopt it because that's what they see as the answer.
Yeah.
What comes with that adoption?
Mhm.
Lawsuits,
Mhm.
defending it, then I don't need to be a guinea pig for anybody.
Yeah.
Somebody else can, take the charge. Find out from the schools. You didn't want to say who are they? What's their experience been? How long has it been? Were there any challenges? What were the problems implementing it?
Mhm.
That's the level of information I would
And if-
need to even consider it.
And if just having signs helps the kids, then can we just have the signs without having?
Well, I was about to say,
Policy, right?
what
Like,
would prevent us if we
Yeah.
don't have this policy? I still think we should hang signs that say
Yeah.
no firearms, and because for kids, they need the more often the better.
mhm.
For families, more often the better. Then it comes down to enforcement, because do you have a policy piece behind that? For kids, we can enforce it. It's state law.
It's, yeah, well,
State
nobody
law
under,
to what, 18? and
nobody
then
under
you can-
21 can get a concealed carry.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that already precludes any student.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It
Yeah.
does.
So
Yeah.
if we could do, then the question is, what would the cost be?
Yeah.
And we can already just say by ORS, no one under, I mean, I don't know what you do,
Mhm.
no student,
Mhm.
because that's a definitive,
Mhm.
that's a definition we can use, no student may, and I guess anytime you define it, then it might seem that we're allowing.
There
others,
is
but-
law, like there is law. Any person who intentionally possesses a loaded or unloaded firearm in any instrument used as a dangerous weapon while in or on a public building, convicted of a.
But then you'd have to look
But
at.
that's not a concealed carry.
So then.
The concealed
that-
carry.
So then
I can
that
legally
reference
carry.
That's,
connection with.
that's a true statement.
Mhm.
And then in the concealed carry, it will define whether or not and in what cases it disallows that.
Mhm.
How does it counteract that? So that is
Mhm.
absolutely true. And is there anything in concealed carry that would say that doesn't apply?
Mhm.
And maybe it doesn't, maybe it still says, no, in these buildings, it certainly does, I don't know. I don't know anything about all this stuff,
Mhm. Yeah,
not
what
my
I-
forte.
yeah, yeah.
I don't
Um,
see any harm in having
Signs.
signs though, that says, we care about your safety, we want everyone to feel safe, please don't bring in
The only,
weapons, alcohol, drugs,
I
whatever.
agree with you. The only ambiguity would be is if a citizen, adult citizen comes in and asks, does that mean me?
Mhm.
And then we could clear that up.
Yeah,
But right now, you're not gonna put all the
right,
implications.
right,
in the
right,
sign.
right.
Right,
Right.
and again, I'm not sure, I'd have to go back, cause like I said, I was reading this last night and it was very interesting reading about it. But whether or not if someone has a legal concealed carry,
Mhm.
and we have not
Mhm.
said no, I don't know, but again, then how do we enforce
So
it?
I
This
think
is-
we have to have a policy for
So,
concealed carry.
Okay.
When we were trying to do those signs,
Mhm.
it was mind numbing how difficult it was to get to one statement that was clear,
Mhm.
convincing, not unwelcoming.
Exactly.
It was so
Uh-huh,
hard, but that's
right.
part of the point.
Yeah.
We can say definitively, students not allowed,
Yeah,
absolutely not allowed. But then when you do that, are we saying if you're not a student, it is allowed? No.
exactly.
Right.
So but we
Right.
also don't want to say, please don't, for everybody else that we have to say please to, because that allows students to think that we're.
Right.
Please don't. It's
Right,
a tough
right,
one.
right.
It is.
Student,
Yeah.
no.
Mhm.
We could have more conversations, but what would make me comfortable if we're going down. The board obviously does need to consider whether they want to bring this forward or not, then it's a board discussion, I'm separating these two things. So then for us, just no firearms, no weapons, firearms, knives, whatever, are prohibited, something like that.
Mhm.
That's it. And then if somebody has a question about the policy, they can go to the administrator. They can go to someone who will answer it,
Yeah.
because there's no way we're gonna clear that up in a simple
Yeah,
sign.
exactly.
There isn't, but
Mhm.
what would the volume, I mean,
I don't think it would be huge.
unfortunately, John, I see parents sometimes, or adults, I should say, not
Mhm.
parents. If you see something that says I can't,
Agreed.
I'm
Yep.
gonna test you.
exactly.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
I don't wanna, invite
Mhm.
animosity and, control.
The other part of it that I just worry about a little bit is if you put up a sign, if you have the policy, then does that lower your attentiveness to someone has a weapon of some kind, do I need to report that?
Oh, I don't think so.
Because then if you look at it and you say, well, do
Yeah.
they have, I mean, I don't know, that's
But
sort
it's
of.
a good
my
question to ask,
You know,
yeah.
that's kind of my question, where does that place it, and does it place it again in that, more in that complacency, I don't need to be looking for it, because it's obviously not going to be
Mhm.
here, because we put a sign up.
Yep.
And we have a policy, so I will look up also, because this person is sending me notes of who has adopted these.
Mhm.
And they are districts near us,
Okay.
and so to find out, and unfortunately, some of the examples that they're using of this would not have stopped anything,
No.
because it was not a concealed carry.
You
item.
never can.
And so it had nothing to do with,
You can
Yes.
never stop it.
Yeah,
no, and that's, again, I don't want a feel-good policy that doesn't work.
Yep.
But I
That
didn't
was
want to
your
tell
point.
this person.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how does it limit us to
Yeah,
not have the
yeah,
policy? I
exactly.
don't
Yeah.
see that it does.
Mhm.
it doesn't limit us. So good question for the board.
Yeah. and
Signs
we
are a
can
good
get some
question
more-
for us
we'll
to
get some
consider.
More questions to it as well,
Mhm.
and I'll look up again, and we can look up the Oregon, 'cause it's not very long,
The
the
person
Oregon,
that's contacting you represents whom?
I don't remember. It's an organization that's here in Oregon that's
Okay,
trying
and
to get.
I'd be interested in knowing
Yeah,
who that is.
yes, okay, so I don't look it up, cause I just don't remember who she's with.
Our next,
Cybersecurity.
so from this group, there's no action officially taken into work session. For you as board members, you may want to talk about it as a board, which is a different process.
Oh, is that a different, how can I talk about it with the board?
I think you guys have your own process for bringing agenda items to the board as opposed to this committee brings policy to the board.
Gotcha, cause we're
Be
not,
in the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
cause yeah. 'cause
I
it's
filled out
not-
2 of those, by the way.
Okay, good, no,
Okay.
I
Okay,
guess
so
emails,
this
I
will,
didn't.
You got that
okay, I'll
email.
put it up on the spreadsheet.
Mhm.
Cause yeah, I don't want it to come as a
where it came
recommendation
from.
from the policy committee.
No.
Oh,
because we're
good.
Not, doing
Yeah.
that.
How
And I'll
long is
look up
that?
also
You could just
the
search for
PCO Terry.
DBA.
I don't know, but what's the date?
This was back in May.
Okay.
when it first initially
EHB
came.
in this
Great, thank
policy
you.
status, or where is
Um,
EHB?
So I'll make
Is
a
it
note
printed
of
out here?
that, and I'm gonna put it up on as a.
The one that
proposed
Jeff
agenda
forwarded.
item, and then we'll see if it applies. It is.
Check in the
I'm sorry.
packet.
I'm gonna put it up as.
What's in the
as a-
packet?
as a
Should we even
yeah, yeah,
upload it like
yeah,
into
that's
the AR
I'm not gonna
review
put it on the
status thing?
agenda.
It's on the
Put it on the
agenda.
list.
No, no, I'm just was looking like.
Oh, yeah.
I'll
Is it
Okay. Yeah.
EHB?
Recently or?
At the last.
Oh, there it is. I see it.
Gotcha,
Okay.
gotcha, okay.
I see it.
Oh, and I bet maybe that was before the email.
Okay.
We worked on it after. Email notification and sent those on that spreadsheet.
No, I got it during the board meeting. You
Yes,
submitted it
yes,
during the
yes,
board meeting.
yes.
Did you guys not get that?
I did,
I'm
well,
not sure.
obviously I missed
Okay.
it.
She
She did get
Somebody
notification,
emailed,
so let
I'm
me.
not
Okay.
sure. I'm not-
I definitely got it.
Okay.
And so I can.
Does it get
forward
from you?
No, I've gotten other
No.
ones when there's been updates.
I feel like
to it.
it said.
You guys
that-
ignored me, Tracy.
No, I got it. And I'm like, okay, now we know. So when we
just
have
had
our
to
meeting.
picture-
I'll go back and look. We don't need to do it right now.
Okay.
for sure.
Let me see.
Okay.
Our next policy is EHB. This is a new policy. Jeff has done research.
Okay,
It's really related to exactly what it says, cybersecurity and requirements. Pretty straightforward if you've had a chance to read it. To give you a little bit of background, we know that districts receive a tax.
Sorry,
Yep.
Chef just texted. He is watching the meeting if we have any questions.
Got it.
oh,
Good.
okay,
Good.
all right.
All right.
We have a lot of questions. for the policy.
People I know.
Yeah.
Good. So Jeff can answer all the questions that we've had so far up to this point. That's what I just heard him say. Awesome.
He's available if we got hours. He's
Since Jeff is online, he and his team have done yeoman's work to make us more secure as a district.
Yes,
It's taken several years, it's lots of training, it's always continued review of systems. And from his expert lens, he believes, and I agree, that we need a cybersecurity policy. That's why this one is being forwarded.
so the only question that I had about this one was in the very last paragraph.
Mhm.
Policy applies to staff, third-party agents,
Mhm.
district affiliate, students and families. Board members who have a district email address,
Oh,
because that
Add
was
in
part
board
of,
members?
that was part of a recommendation from OSBA several years ago.
We're
that we
not part
do
of the
that.
district affiliate.
I don't think so, because I'm not a district affiliate, I'm an elected official.
Yeah. So add board members into that list.
Right, because then that would be clear for board members that your board email is only for use for board stuff. You're not to use that for things that you would use your personal email for.
Did Jeff get this from OSBA? Did you say that?
We can ask him. I don't remember where he got it from.
I'm promoting him right now.
Okay,
Okay, okay. And so,
Hello, can you hear me?
you're
All right.
dating Jeff Gibbs.
Hello.
Okay.
Yeah, this draft policy came from OSBA. The highlights are things that we tweaked our team when we reviewed this. Just some minor tweaks to, I think, add clarity to who was referenced. I think adding board members is certainly a good option there in that last paragraph.
what was your question right there, Chris? He may not have heard it as he was being promoted.
No, I think it was just adding board members. Oh, and then because it says it includes in that same paragraph, the last paragraph, that it includes students and families. And so students have the email address. What part of it are families applying to that? Because they're getting into parent view, they're getting into their student records. Is that kind of the expectation for?
Yep.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, the idea there is just that we include everybody that has access to anything. So students, parents, certainly board members, third-party agents. So that's anybody that we use as a subcontractor or a partner in any way that has access to anything.
So like our food service, our transportation, things like that.
Partner Sun program.
Done.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that also include then, how are charter schools connected with us in any way? How are they connected?
Yeah,
What do
charter
they
schools.
have access to?
Charter schools are in our same Synergy student information system because they take attendance, enter grades, and that all has to go through us to ODE for state reporting. So they do use that system.
Uh-huh.
Hey, Jeff, are charters using our access to email, or do they have their own separate system for that?
Cal, we have a service contract with Cal, so we do a lot of their IT support and we create their email accounts, but it is a separate system. And then the other charters are completely separate for their own email systems.
Okay.
And for the Cal, it's a contractual arrangement that they pay for your services,
Correct.
which would mean they wouldn't be part of this because it's a contractual agreement. Okay.
Let me think about
I'm
this
kind
for a
of stuck
second.
on that a little bit,
Yeah,
because they
because
are a
it's gonna
partner, like we
be-
have a we have partner agreements with our charters.
But they provide their own food service. I mean, they pay their own food service, right? That's out of their
Yeah,
budget.
but like,
With technology.
it would be
they're-
more,
The agreement with the charter school is the arrangement of them having authorization to be in existence. What the contract for Cal for IT services only is a paid
Mhm.
AP billing system, and the contract for that service that we provide. To me, it's completely different.
Me too.
Should include whatever it is.
Because Lewis and Clark could choose to contract with our IT services, they're not. So it's really a charter choice. So we're just providing an extra service by contract.
And Cal
That they're
has,
paying for specifically
Yes, exactly.
through accounts payable.
Mhm.
It's not the state, you know what I mean?
So
It's-
this policy wouldn't apply to them?
Correct, in my view, but, and it's not that it couldn't, but I don't wanna, if this policy applies, then what's the contract?
well, so
And
that,
is it, can we even hold them, to the policy if they're not,
But
it's,
our kids, some
So-
of our kids go there.
So,
Some,
but
right,
from
but-
other districts too. So
so what it would be then is that this same language should be and probably is in the Cal service agreement, that if you're using stuff, that you're supplying that it would have these same expectations.
and if not,
that's my question, I would say they are.
you'd have to look, but, and if it isn't in there now, maybe consider,
just
since this
update it.
is new.
Uh-huh.
Now it would be a new thing that we add to the contract, the next, re-up cycle.
Right.
Jeff, are you hearing any, oh, sorry, Myra.
So they are considered a district affiliate.
Yeah, they are, but are you hearing any concern that you are in disagreement with out of this conversation?
No, I agree. We could add that when we go to renew the MOU with Cal for next year for technology services. Certainly, they've been in line with all our cybersecurity moves and have been in lockstep with the district when we make those improvements and changes. So I don't think they would
Because
have any concerns, and I don't have any concerns about that.
I agree with both perspectives. I think Kathy's right. It's a service that we're contracting and we just do that and it makes it separate, but they are definitely an affiliate of ours too. So there's an argument both sides.
So
Well,
it's
and-
really about access to district data.
Yeah.
Who has access to district data? And we have data sharing agreements that we
We
have,
do.
like, we have a process for that.
We do.
So really, the third party is anyone who's gone through that process of data sharing
Mhm.
agreement. Is that fair to say?
Mhm.
And so then a question, maybe this might help a little bit, that in so Gresham High School, the website, the information, it's all bound by, what would be bound by now, this new policy,
Mhm.
as well as consistency across the district. They can't go out and create a brand new website that doesn't match the style of content. Cal, on the other hand, because they do have other students, they have students that are outside of, they are not all necessarily our kids, but we don't control their website. We don't control their access to stuff. So it is theirs. So that would fall under as a district affiliate of some kind, because you guys don't want to be in charge of maintaining and updating their website, right? Oh, you do? All right, awesome.
No, I was
Yeah,
agreeing
yeah.
with you. Yeah, they maintain their own website.
So maintaining that means that because we're providing, and when we're providing the service, what does that mean when you say that we're providing the service to that? We're providing them access to what are you providing?
Our agreement with Cal is we treat them like a normal school. So we make sure their devices are up to date and working. If they have an issue with Wi-Fi, printing, whatever, we go and we support them the same as we would with any other school.
Okay,
As well, we
and
provide
then,
oversight and support with their purchasing. So if they're looking to buy new equipment, we help them select things that are compatible with our existing systems and will meet their needs.
So just to be clear on my point, they can be in this policy, but it can't just be exclusively this policy. It needs to be in the contract.
It does.
As long as
Mhm.
there isn't anything in here that obligates us to something to them that they shouldn't be. Do you see what I mean? So
Agreed.
I don't know the answer and how, it doesn't matter to me where it falls, but just make sure that one doesn't obligate you where you don't want it to,
Right.
and you don't have the obligation where you need it to.
Yep.
That's my only
In
point.
my reading of it, I don't think it obligates us to anything.
Or them to us.
Might be, or them to us, but it might be worth a discussion between you and me, Jeff, and then we can be sure.
I would loop Carla into that,
Mhm.
just in terms of her expertise with charter
Okay.
agreements.
okay. All right, so will this, I think that, any other questions for Jeff? Because I think that it sounds like this one, will it be ready to go to the board for work session conversation?
I believe it is.
Okay,
Okay,
so it'll go to a work session, Jeff, and we'll bring it to the board for them to look at, and there might be some other questions, but, I think if we get clarification on the Cal affiliate, whatever we need to find out about that, but it sounds like it's pretty good, and it'll just go there. And adding board members to that list of people that, are supposed to be paying attention to this.
copy.
Okay, all right. Okay, thanks, Jeff, for joining us. I think, is he clear to go? Any other questions on this policy?
Have a great Friday, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
That is our list today.
okay, so, yeah, we'll put that on as an agenda. Okay. Just going back over this to review real quick. So back on DN, gonna work on that one, look at an AR, that one will have to come back to this committee before we take it to the full board, right?
Yes.
Okay, cause it needs some more rewrite.
It does.
CBG and, evaluation of superintendent, that'll go to work session. GBN, JBA, going to work session. And,
And just
and
the,
update the language around board member elected or, okay,
the CBG, if the
oh,
Senate bill doesn't come in where it's supposed to, and there's language that has to be approved, it will come back here for reviewing. Work session, if there's no language that they have to draft.
okay,
If there is, it comes back here.
okay, even if it's just adding a reference line? You want to come back? here?
No, it was only if you had to create the paragraph to include
Got
the
it,
language.
okay.
So footnotes we could add and take
Yeah.
to work session, we
Okay.
add language,
We're
we
adding
bring it here
language, we'll bring it
first.
back here, okay, okay. I'm gonna write the word language on here. All right. So then the GBN, JBA, sexual harassment, those two policies, were they ready to come to the
Mhm.
board?
Yep.
Okay, and then GBNAB, JHFE, those reporting, and that was the cleaning up the definition. That was just cleaning up that where it kept saying. And I was gonna go back and reread it just to make sure where I thought I kept saying employee. KGBB, the firearms prohibited. I'm gonna put that up as an agenda item. Spreadsheet. And the cybersecurity EHB will come to a work session for discussion. Okay,
So just for clarification, the KGBB as an agenda item on the spreadsheet, so that's separate from our normal policy.
yeah. Because we will bring it through as an agenda item. For work
Just want to
session.
make sure I didn't put it on the wrong area. on the agenda.
Yeah, so it'll come through as an agenda item as opposed to a recommendation from the committee for review, because the committee is not recommending it.
So, just to be clear,
Okay,
I thought you were gonna put it on the board request for, okay. but
Yes.
when
Yeah,
you
that's
say
what it
an
means.
Agenda item, say spreadsheet.
okay,
We'll do
yeah,
that agenda item on spreadsheet.
that's what I mean.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's what I, through
Yeah.
that process, yeah.
It is, the question is, the spreadsheet answers the question. Is it gonna go to an agenda? Does it need more?
Right.
So it's asking the question. So I think if we use spreadsheet, because otherwise I thought, okay, I thought you said spreadsheet twice. And then when I said put it on the agenda item, I'm like, wait, is it going on an agenda? So
Yeah.
it just brings it
So
right
we're
back
on
to
what's the
the
difference?
spreadsheet.
Yeah.
The board
on the
planning
agenda spreadsheet.
spreadsheet. Yeah, board planning spreadsheet. I think you, when we first started talking
Uh-huh.
about that, you kept, you had the same
Good
reaction
thing,
I did, which
yeah.
is, wait, don't call it agenda.
Agenda, because,
Because it makes it sound like it's
Yeah.
going on the
but if I
agenda.
just say spreadsheet, I'm
Board-
gonna look at it and go.
Board
what
planning
spreadsheet am I putting
spreadsheet,
it on?
board planning spreadsheet.
Board.
I think
planning.
that's a good one.
Okay, that works better.
I referenced it as board request spreadsheet.
Request. Yes, that is actually
Yeah,
right.
because actually we aren't necessarily planning.
Yeah, it's just a
We're just
request. You're
requesting.
right.
But I have it in my
Request
notes too,
spreadsheet.
Jenny, that's all.
All right.
Yeah,
And then I'm gonna cross off the word agenda so I don't say it again. Board planning.
Board request.
Request.
Board
spreadsheet.
request, yeah. We're not bringing it from the committee. How about that? And then work session is gonna go to, or the cybersecurity is going to work session. So
Yeah.
anything else today? And then Mr. Cook, so this isn't a committee question, so I think we need to be
Out of the,
out of our
So
committee.
we got our next.
So is there, yeah, when is our next meeting? Do we have one?
Calendar? Yeah, they
And
should
our-
be scheduled out through
Okay,
January.
Okay, and are we getting updates now from
October
OSBA's in their update cycle as well?
they should, in another 4 or 5 weeks, I expect the fall
Okay,
deal. So we'll see.
okay.
Yeah, so October 25th, the next meeting.
Okay. Okay. All right, so I don't think there's any other business for the committee meeting. And I do have a follow-up question for Mr. Cook unrelated to the committee meeting, so
Yes, ma'am.
I believe